Oh, we appreciate the time after what was a very lengthy night, Jay. And these players are so young, and at the top, they're often drafted into circumstances that are pretty difficult. But if there's a player that you believe is ready to make a significant impact immediately, who would that player be?
Well, you would always start with the top three, but I'm going to go to number 4, and that's Keegan Murray from Iowa, Scott. He's an older player. He's 22. Made a tremendous improvement from last year to this year. He averaged 7 points a game 2 years ago. This year, averaged 24. He can really run. He's a good defender. He's got great hands. He's not going to be on your Instagram feed with highlight dunks and all that, even though he dunks a lot. But he makes the right play over and over again. So while he's not spectacular in anything he does, at the end of the game, his numbers are spectacular. And I think Sacramento made a really good pick at number 4. You know, Jaden Ivey from Purdue was available there, who's, I think, the best athlete in the draft. But I think Sacramento probably got the most NBA-ready today plug-and-play guy in Keegan Murray.
You mentioned the dunks. He's the only player in the nation last year with 50 dunks and 53s. So the modern game, he's got it all. Now, patience, Jay, sports fans aren't patient, but most of us aren't, right? But if there's a fan base out there that you say to them, listen, give this guy some time and you're going to really like who he becomes. Who's that player?
Well, I think I'd be talking to San Antonio and Jeremy Sohan from Baylor. Sohan has a ton of ability. He's fundamentally sound. He's got size and length. He can defend multiple positions, and he's really skilled on the offensive end. You know, he hasn't really proven that he can consistently knock down perimeter shots, but I think he'll get that in time and with work. But Scott Drew used him as a point guard at times. He really played all 5 positions throughout the course of the season. And as the season went on, got better and better. High-level rebounder. I think if given some time to really develop because he's so young, I think Jeremy Sohan is going to be a real value pick for the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah, he's the first Spurs pick in the top 10 since Tim Duncan. This is funny. He was born a month before Duncan won his second NBA title. And if we're gonna look at a pick, Jay, outside of the lottery, and in the past couple of years, we've seen players. Maybe it's a better fit. Maybe it's a better team. A Maxey for Philadelphia, Bones Highland in Denver last year. But a player that you think really could be impactful, maybe soon. And I think you and I might be aligned here because I know you like this guy a lot, and I know I love him. Who's that player?
It's one guy that I thought should have been drafted higher, and that's Malachi Branham from Ohio State. Just a freshman. Shot 83% from the free throw line. You know, his coach, Chris Holtman, talks about what a quick learner he is, and his shooting touch is fantastic. And I think Holtman said he's never coached a guy that shoots it with the kind of touch that Malachi Branham shoots it with. And that's saying something because Chris has coached some outstanding players. But I just see a tremendous upside with Malachi Branham. And the last 11 games, I think it was, Scott, he averaged 20 points a game, shot 57% from the field. So when most players as freshmen are hitting that wall toward the end of the season, he continued to get better and better. Now, it may take him a little bit of time on the physical end of things, but he's an NBA wing for a long time as long as he stays healthy. And I think he's going to be really good. And I think we could look back on this draft as you know, Malachi Branham was taken too late.
I agree with you. Sounds like you love the Spurs draft, but if you saw Branham play as the year wore on, his confidence just grew. One of those things where I'm sure Coach Holtman thought, son of a gun, right? He's great. You love that he's great, but you know you're only going to get to enjoy him for that brief window of time in Columbus. Speaking of brief windows of time, you're in the city, but I know places don't stay open forever, and I know you're due for a short pour or a tall one, and I always appreciate you sharing some time at the end of a busy night, Jay. Thank you.
Yeah, Scott, it's a tremendous sacrifice for me because you're standing in the way of me and my favorite beverage, perhaps several of them. So I'm going to be face down in the gutter pretty soon.
The annual gutter call. It's look for Billis in the gutter somewhere in a borough near you. JB, be good until next time, brother.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it. All right, now to a significant story which threatened to overshadow the draft to a degree. Sources have told Adrian Wojnarowski that Kyrie Irving's got a list of teams he'd like the Nets to consider working with on a sign-and trade if he and the team cannot agree on terms. The list includes Lakers, Clippers, Knicks, Heat, Mavs, and 76ers. And Hello, Woj. It was, 11 years ago that Kyrie out of Duke, a one and done, was the story of this night. And again, he's a significant story. A lot of smoke that it could be a fourth team for him. Maybe he and the Nets, they can't figure it out. You tell us where things stand.
Well, Scott, if Kyrie Irving's willing to take a significant pay cut, he's eligible to opt into his contract at $36 million for next season. Out in the marketplace, there isn't anything nearly that. And now, if he was to leave and look for a team with salary cap space, I'm told that it would be the Lakers, but they've got a $6 million exception for him to sign. That's all he could do. He would need the Nets' help to do a sign-and trade to a team. The Nets would take back salary. He could get a big contract. That might be an unlikely scenario. I think this is a negotiation. This is a conversation still that's been going on between the Nets and Kyrie Irving. He wants a long-term, big contract from them. They want to do a shorter deal that gives them some protections in language and the contract, because simply Kyrie Irving hasn't been available enough to the Nets, especially over the last couple of years. And so there's a middle ground potentially that they'll be able to reach. But listen, what looms over all of this is Kevin Durant and how he feels about Kyrie Irving potentially leaving, and then what this team would look like without Kyrie Irving. Would it still be a championship contender? And those are the two rails that Josiah, the owner, and the GM, Sean Marks, are trying to walk right now.
Well, they want to avoid that third rail, and you don't want to wind up with nothing, right? And I mean, there's a couple of things here that I want to follow with. Number one, what's the timeline? Like, what are we thinking here?
Well, his opt-in date is in the middle of next week, and if he opts out of the contract, he's a free agent. He could still do a deal with the Nets. He could actually do more than the $36 million option. He could do a 1+1 contract, or he could just opt out and leave. And so I do think there'll be a resolution on this, perhaps before free agency. Okay. He can negotiate an extension off of his deal if he opts in. But listen, there's going to have to be more communication between these two sides. Kyrie Irving has said he wants to stay. He wants to continue to play with Kevin Durant. But, of course, he wants to do it on the kind of long-term contract that right now is not available for him in Brooklyn.
And just to follow on the KD angle, because obviously we know the friendship is real and it's deep, but I mean, are we talking that they are absolutely attached at the hip from Kevin Durant's perspective?
What I was told today, and even earlier this week, Scott, is that KD wanting to remain with the Nets is not necessarily contingent on if Kyrie Irving walks. That if he walks, he wants to see what the roster could still look like, how it could be reshaped, how they could still be a championship contender. Durant's got 4 years on his contract. He's starting that new 4-year max deal. This isn't the transfer portal. You don't get to say where you'd like to go. Yeah. And so if he decided and wanted and asked for a trade, which I'm told he's not told the Nets that he's going to do or is ready to do right now, he's probably not going to have a lot of say in where he goes, because any team in the league, all 29, would line up and say, if we trade for Kevin Durant, we know he's got to play here. We can give up a massive haul of assets. So it's one thing when you've got 1 or 2 years left on your deal and you can head into free agency and a team is uneasy about how much to give up because they could end up with nothing. You know you're going to have Kevin Durant. So I do think that has to be part of his thinking if he does ask out of Brooklyn. But right now, I still think there's a pathway for the Nets, for Kyrie Irving, for Kevin Durant to find a way forward together. But it's murky and it's uncertain. And, listen, the future of this Nets organization very well is going to be determined here in the next several days to a week.
Well, the thesaurus of Woj on display tonight. We'll be zeroed in, focused, all of our attention on your Twitter feed for the latest information that comes out of this and everything else NBA. As always, Woj, appreciate you, my man.
Thank you, Scott.
One team watching the Nets very closely as well, Houston, as they could get up to 5 picks from Brooklyn over the next 5 years, 2 guaranteed plus 3 potential swaps the Rockets can exercise if the Nets spot is more desirable. It's any consolation to the Nets, they do have the 76ers first rounder in 23 and 27. All right, fresh off hearing his name called first, heading to Orlando, the number 1 pick, Paolo Banchero, stops by the show to share the emotions of the evening. And the College World Series championship is set thanks to one of the better pitching performances in Ole Miss history. Those highlights.